We're back with Season 7, Episode 4, Rock Solid Friendship. This is the episode in which Pinky is loud and obnoxious. I'm kidding. This is an episode in which Maud is thinking about moving to Ponyville, and Pinky gets in the way of that consistently and constantly, and Starlight and Maud end up bonding? We'll go with bonding. And it's actually a pretty good episode, with one notable exception. I feel like I'm saying that a lot lately. This episode was by, dramatic pause, Nick Confalone, who has done mostly average episodes, but he did put together Saddle Row Review, which I was rather fond of. Some decent, filler episodes with some good ideas with some bad execution. Like, look at, we've got Party Pooped, Hearthbreakers, and Dungeons and Discords, all three of which were basically, and, well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? I've noticed in my analysis of television especially, there are writers who are just like this, right? Like they write stuff that is simultaneously and also in the same episode. It's just their style, Maybe it's just because they try stuff. I really don't know. Anyways. All right, today we're going to accept... Is that magnesium-rich basalt? Wave it, Boulder. You'll notice that Pinkie Pie's parents are apparently royalty. The woman is allowed to show emotion. Oh, the man is not. The man can only stoically pat the woman. All right. So, the episode's cold open does get across... he's also the photographer, you're right. The episode's cold open gets across the biggest benefit and flaw of the episode pretty much in a 1-2 punch. The benefit's obvious. Maud and her potentially moving towards being a more recurring character status. The negative is Pinkie Pie. Now, I don't want to sound unkind here, but in the early parts of the episode, I would say that Pinky is the most out of character, in the cold open and in the train. Because Pinkie Pie does have a skill, a talent, if you will, for reading the room. In fact, she's got an entire massive amount of information on what people like and how they like it. And she's already learned several times the idea that not everyone likes the same things in the same way. Pinky's good at that sort of thing. Here's the catch. I don't think this is actually character assassination. Believe it or not. Yeah, in this very episode, she breaks out statistics. The problem is, this is Pinky freaking the hell out. This is her in the middle of what is effectively a nervous breakdown. Really. And so, her constantly going, ha! Just completely over the top, while it is irritating, and it does bring the episode's quality down, is nonetheless in character, I think. I do believe that this is fully logical for Pinky to be reacting this way. Because think about this from a secondary perspective here. Pull yourself away from the scenes for a moment. Not only does she obviously very much want her sister to live nearby, whom she loves dearly, that's always been very well established, and she absolutely loves hanging out with, so being able to hang out with her regularly, I bet you know what that feels like. I bet most of you know exactly what it feels like wanting to live close to or with someone whose company you enjoy tremendously. It's not that hard to process, right? Add on to that another fact. Fear. Because she's done with her Rocktorate, which means now there's a pretty good chance that she's going to move somewhere else. And she's already mentioned it's the Gorge, which is over there. And, well, that means she's going to get to see her sister less than she already has been, than the normal amount that she's been seeing. So there's the desire to want to see her more, and there's the fear of seeing her less. Like I said, she's freaking out. And yeah, this is definitely over the top, even for Pinkie Pie. As S.I. Ross points out, Maud, I actually make a note of this later in the episode, Maud gets irritated and frustrated with her. Maud, who usually doesn't even express irritation or frustration, gets irritated with her. I do think it detracts from the episode. I'm not going to segue away from that, and that does pull this episode down in quality, but it is very logical, and it does fit with the way Pinky has been portrayed thus far. Because Pinky is entirely aware of the word might. I might move to Ponyville. Like I said, she knows what that means. Slow down, Pinkie Pie. You what? That got a laugh out of me. Fuzzy slippers. Remember that for later. Now I'm going to admit something, and hopefully Lord Harrimont isn't here for this. I actually don't mind it if an episode repeats an Aesop, as long as it's well done. We mentioned this last time because he mentioned that if we had repeated the Twilight isn't a good babysitter thing, it would be the same as Pinky's wouldn't be a good babysitter thing. And while I do think those are different nuances of the same topic, I can easily see how they could be conceived as the same Aesop. This episode, I'm pretty sure, repeats an Aesop we've seen before, that different friends like different things, and that's okay. I'm okay with that as long as it's well done. That's really what this boils down to. As long as you're going to repeat it properly, as long as you're going to pull out a good episode out of it, I'm okay with that. The problem, and the biggest problem, is when it's the same character and it's the exact same lesson and the exact same resolution. That's just irritating, because at that point, that's just anti-continuity, right? If I go through this big, huge, traumatic thing where I have to watch my child die, this is a made-up example, although I am kind of cribbing off of Voyager here. And then later on, I have to go through this big, horrible, traumatic thing of watching my child die, and I get the same exact lesson from it both times. That's irritating. If, on the other hand, to use a similar example, learning to let go, which is the actual lesson in question, if the one character has to learn to let go, and then, you know, some seasons later, there's another character who has to learn to let go of their father or whatever who's dying, I'm okay with that. It's the same Aesop. But I'm okay with that because, first of all, it's a different character. Second of all, it's a different scenario. And third of all, let's assume they're both good episodes. Make sense? I just wanted to point that out because that was on my mind anyways. So, Pinky literally playing the harp for the gem cave. That got a smile out of me too. Rarity is there with Spike and the same helmet. By the way, we're going to get a bunch of continuity counters this episode, so I'm just going to kind of keep track of my hand before we get to that. So that's continuity counter number 1. Because, yeah, got the hard hat bow. This then leads to, these are all really common gems. And poor Rarity's crying in the background. Felt so bad for her. That being said, this makes sense. We actually had a whole discussion, once upon a time, if you'll remember, about a theory that the gems literally grow in the nearby area. You remember that? Because they are so common, and they are harvested en masse, and while they are used they're fungible with currency, let's put it that way. They're not the primary method of currency, and for the most part, they have no problem using, for example, an entire bucket of diamonds just to highlight a single dress, right? So we've talked before about how the gemstones thing is super common and how that makes sense. So, yeah, exactly, as a Ross. I just wanted to point that out because it's interesting, the way they portrayed all this. But anyways, moving on. There might literally be a diamond industry, just not a diamond industry. So, Maud is, of course, completely unimpressed with the giant crystal castle. Yeah, I've been there. Lots of buildings are made of rock. It's a solid building material. Maud, dear, I love you, but you've never seen a crystal castle like this. Come on! Give me a break! This? No, maybe she has. I don't know. I mean, probably, Trathan. That's actually something I've theorized for a while. I do find it funny, though. This is the first scene where it becomes very clear that Pinky is actually losing it. Because she starts actively just making stuff up. Look, here's some rocks, and she pulls out the prickly bushes. And then Tank. And then Lyra. And Lyra's like, okay, I'll stay still. And Bonbon's just, like, shoving her off. Yeah, no, this is Pinky openly and obviously losing it. She's like, all right, no, I got nothing. She even deflates. Like, okay, nope. I got nothing. You win. I lose. I accept. And she is so deflated about it. Yeah, the 1 HP thing comes up again here. And yes, Tank is a tortoise. By the way, that's continuity counter number 2. I forgot to say that out loud. I did it on my fingers. By the way, is this the first time we've heard Lyra Heartstring's name? I'm not actually sure about that. Anyways, so... Maudalena Daisy Pie, do you want a friend? Alright. This is, slice of life. Okay. This is the second time. Oh, apparently Amending Fences said... Oh, that's right, because she was actually in Amending Fences. So we're up to 3 episodes now. I couldn't remember. Forgive me. Yeah, Maud is a classic grade A introvert, because she wants friends. As most people do. I want to stress that. Real quick, thank you, Churchy, very, very much. Always appreciate. Thank you. Let's see. Metal Gear Solid 2, Dragon Age Inquisition, and Kingdoms of Amalur. You got it. Give me one moment to jot that down. Yeah, Pinky is the classic extrovert. I actually agree with that. I'm actually not sure if I'm either. I used to call myself an extrovert. But the truth is, it kind of depends on my mood. I'm not sure what I am, and I don't care. But to get back into this for a moment, allow me to share a story from literally yesterday. Yesterday, I was talking to a friend. I won't give details, but that friend was at a party with like 100 people. He was not particularly happy to be at that party. You know why? Because there were like 100 people there. Now, he likes hanging out with people. Like 5 people. Maybe 4, maybe 2. And this probably explains everything I need to right here, because I imagine most of you are in this boat as well. Right? I point this out because my sister, my mother, every single one of my close friends, right? Like just about everybody I know who I am close to likes friends, likes having people to hang out with, just a smaller group, right? Honestly, I imagine most of you are the same way. And no, there's no judgment and there's no insult intended. It's just most people I tend to interact with tend to prefer gaining... Yes, I know, Trathan. We're going to fling that out the window really quick, because that's not how that word is used, and effectively it's gained a second definition, which has to do with the relative level of sociality regarding how many people you interact with. So, we're going to use the second definition. Moving on. So... Because that is common parlance at this point. People use it that way, and it's become the definition. Anyways. So, the majority of people I know and I'm close to prefer to hang out with smaller groups of people. 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. You get them in a party, they find a corner. Right? And again, you probably know what I mean by that. And again, I bring this up, though. Fiction, and Hollywood in particular... usually has absolutely no idea how to portray this, so credit to MLP for doing this better than most fiction does. Because most fiction portrays that as a bad thing, and something that they need to be cured from. Final Fantasy VIII, excuse me. Most fiction likes to look at that like, oh my god, something's wrong with them. I mean, how many, there's a term for that genre of movie. Where, like, there's the introvert, there's the antisocial high school girl or college kid, and, oh my gosh, they're so cloistered. And then you've got the big, happy person who's like, oh man, I've got to break you out of your shell. And that's the plot of the movie. It was really common in the 80s and 90s. This is really common. Yeah, so, point being, credit to MLP for showcasing that Maud wants to hang out with people. She doesn't want to be alone. And she doesn't want to hang out with tons of people. And she doesn't want to be all like Pinkie Pie is, because she's different. Like, I know this is such a simple thing, and I hate to heap praise on something so simple, but again, it's so damned rare. You know what I mean? So, credit to you, episode. Now, I point this out as well. The show has pretty consistently showed Maud is awesome. There's a reason she's one of my favorite characters. But this is probably, I think, the best showcasing of Maud as a person. And if I might be so bold, I think it's because they've gotten better at the animation. I think because they've upped the animation budget so many times that they can show tiny little details and nuances in how she showcases herself. It's not just the fact that she's smiling, it's how she's smiling, it's how her eyebrows move while she's smiling, you know, tiny little stuff like that. There's even a scene later on where she's talking to Pinkie Pie, and there are very, very tiny lines that have appeared right under her eyes. They're like this freaking big. And yet they're there to showcase just how much she's Maud is starting to get tired of Pinky. Little stuff like that helps to show those nuances to the kind of person Maud is. Sure, Loner, I don't care. I'm sorry, I don't care. Moving on. I've lost my train of thought now. So Maud is someone who actually does want to interact with other people, who does want to have fun and have a friend, and is tired of not having a friend. And in fact, is probably sick and tired of basically going it alone this entire time. Like, again, the nuance gets across that perspective, that portrayal of someone who's just... It would be nice to have someone to share with other than Boulder. You know, just the way she says that, right? As usual, excellent portrayal to the actress. Now I gotta look it up. God damn it. Alright, fine. Hang on. Hit the stream break. Hit the stream break. Give me a second. I need to look up. Here we go. Oh, this is a great showcasing of Starlight. Probably one of the better Starlight episodes so far. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and be honest. I've never actually heard antisocial used to describe this, which is chaotic evil. No, I'm dead serious. The way that antisocial is being described here as a specific personality disorder sounds like someone who is chaotic evil. That is to say, chaotic actively against the purpose of order, and evil actively against the good of others, right? Someone who is deliberately and persistently lying, being callous or cynical, charming or witting other people for personal gain and personal pleasure, arrogant sense of superiority, recurring problems with the law, recurring criminal issues, violenceness, impulsiveness, failure. I've never actually heard the word used like that. I wonder if this is another one of those situations where we have like a common... Oh, it's right here. Duh, I'm staring right at it. So it feels like we have a difference of common definition versus medical definition, which is something that shows up a lot. Psychopath and sociopath are two other words that tend to have a variance between common definition and medical definition, while we're on the subject. Because I noticed one of the other definitions for antisocial is not desiring the company of others, which is how I intended it. Apparently, however, to be medically correct, that would be asocial. Interesting. Anyways, sorry, you got me on that, Loner. Why I was like, no, I don't care, because I'm... Ah, shoot, I gotta look it up now. Alright, anyways. Let's throw that out there. I've completely lost my train of thought. Where the hell was I? Maud wants to have a friend, right? And that, I think, is incredibly relevant. I mean, yeah, this is MLP, Friendship is Magic. But to be perfectly blunt, I actually legitimately believe, based on my own interactions, and that's anecdotal, that the majority of people want a friend. They may only want one friend, or like 5, or 2, or 50, or 100. It varies. But I do legitimately think that most people in real life do actually want a friend. And yeah, I was actually about to point out, you're my sister, it's different. Which is also a relevant point, because I imagine there's a lot of people out there who relate to that one as well. The idea of... I shouldn't say a lot. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are very close to their family. But there really is a difference between, you know, my relationship with my mom, who I'm quite close to, and my relationship with Pax, who's my friend. Right? Like, those are just so completely different. And obviously, I would rather have both. I mean, I'm the guy who gets along with everyone. That's kind of my shtick. But you get my point, right? So... they're really nailing Maud here, and they're really nailing the social dynamics around Maud, and so you can see why I'm already really positively inclined towards this episode, even though Pinky makes me want to smack her. Ahem. Yeah, Maud also almost destroyed the world and time. Let's ignore that. But I should get ahead to the next point, which is, of course... Starlight comes out, bumbles right into her. Oh, yeah, I remember. You were... Visual gag with Pinky. See, I was hoping you'd tell me while I pretended to remember. I point this out. Starlight has always been kind of honest. That's part of her character. Which I point out because Maud's always been kind of honest. It's part of her character. They express it differently, but I point that out that clear and obvious effort was put by the scripting. And I feel like these scenes in particular between the two got a lot of polishing passes to really make the scenes work the way they need to. Because the two just click immediately. There's immediate and instant chemistry between both the characters and the actresses. And so both are honest with each other, both present each other, you know, both are kind of legit on that. And this then leads to Maud saying it's not like she's enslaved any pony lately. Which leads to Starlight's awkward, and then sad as she leaves. Because she doesn't like being reminded of that. And it is a bit awkward because she's still getting used to these social interaction things. And she is still sad about the fact that that is still something that she's still dealing with because she still should be, as I keep pointing out every time it happens. Every single time. That stupid montage keeps being wrong. Now, interesting side note really quick. Yeah, I know, right, Trihex? Pinky just flips out over that. So I've got an itch, like, right on the edge, right there, you know? Mustache problems. What's interesting here is Pinky, under other circumstances, would probably actually be legitimately great at friendship matchmaking. Because she has so much data and so much information, and, again, she pulls out the statistics twice in this episode. And she's so organized, and she knows so many people, which she keeps track of so well, right? And she's obviously has a vested interest. The catch here is that she has a conflict of interest. Oh my god, I can't believe you said the same thing as Rose. You owe me a Coke, Aceros. She does. She has a conflict of interest. This is the definition of a conflict of interest, by the way. If you've ever heard that phrase thrown out in like a legal thing, this is what that means. But in case I have to summarize it, it's when you're so close to a situation and you want a situation to go a certain way so well that your judgment can't be trusted to do your job properly. That's what that means. Now, it's worth noting that a conflict of interest is not always something that's going to get in the way. Sometimes someone can do a perfectly good job even when they have a conflict of interest. I'll use a Star Trek example of that. In the episode Measure of a Man, Riker has a massive conflict of interest, but is forced by legal circumstances to serve as the opposing lawyer, and does a good job of it. So even though he had a conflict of interest, he still did his job properly. I point that out because Pinky is doing the exact opposite of that in this episode. Pinky is why we have laws and rules against conflict of interest. Because most people can't pull a Riker. Most people can't divorce themselves from their perspective and their desires enough to do their job. No judgment on that. It's just that's the experience, right? That's history. There's also corrupt reasons why that exists as a part of the legal code. Let's not get into that right now. Point being, they wander off. Pinky is failing at her job miserably as a result of said conflict. And so they wander off. And this leads to probably what is actually the funniest joke of the whole episode for me. You know, with the right stone, you could rule all of Equestria if you wanted to. Now, that's funny for me for 3 reasons. First, am I? I can't even do it with a straight face, because it makes me grin so much. Second of all, because it once again shows how Starlight and Maud gel. Starlight loves it, right? Like, Starlight just absolutely is with it, and also is laughing and is also with the joke. But the third thing is I think Maud's right. Based on everything I've done in my various analyses of the setting and the world building of this particular setting, I actually do think that if you found a particular stone or rock or gemstone which had the right mathematical harmonics to perfectly match a certain type of magic, then you really could actually use that to magnify said magic to an extensive amount. In fact, we've already seen this twice. I was actually pointing out that as well. We've seen the changelings do this, and we've seen the elements of harmony do this. So, I'm just saying, there probably are gems or rocks or minerals or whatever out there that would serve as similar magnifiers. Anyways. So, this then leads to her being into kites. Alright, so first of all, I actually looked this up. The foreshadowing, I actually brought it up if you remember the Streaminations. Her having kites in her room in previous episode was apparently deliberate foreshadowing for this. Which is actually brilliant for two reasons. Not just because it's foreshadowing, which is awesome in general, but it was never brought up because Starlight feels embarrassed about liking kites. As she shows in this episode. And that itself is a character point. Now hear me out. This is brilliant construction right here. She's embarrassed about liking kites, and yet within minutes of meeting Maud, she opens up about kites to her. That is how you show chemistry and two people gelling, right there. Just that kind of opening up immediately to someone. That's brilliant. She also, they did their research, if you ever wondered, SLK stands for single line kite, and AOI stands for angle of incidence. And the way she geeks out about kites is absolutely correct. That is, everything she says there is right. Everything she says there is someone who is actually into kites. I point that out because one of the things I have found fascinating about human existence is that there's probably someone out there who's into whatever, right? Now, there's some gross ways to take that, but that's not what I mean. I mean, like, shoot, I can't think what it's called. What is it when you take a chunk of wood and you put it into a device and you turn it? I know it's called turning, but, like, there's another term for this. And then you, like, have a chisel and you carve out something out of it. Lathe, thank you. You know, you turning on a lathe, that kind of stuff. I have discovered, so my dad recently got into that a few years ago. And I have discovered, as a consequence of the fact that he's into it, so obviously I have to be into it so I can hold off a conversation with him about that. There's so much depth to lathing and to turning that, of course, I would never have even suspected there'd be there before. And this is just one example of thousands, right? I've said before I'm a geek of everything, but I'm a surface-level geek about everything. By design, you know, there's very few things I am actually in-depth a geek about. And part of that is because of the fact that there are so many things that there is so much in-depth to go into. Now, I was going to mention the ProZD skit, Trathan. ProZD actually has a water skit. And while it's obviously done as a joke, it's not a joke. That is actually how it is. That is absolutely how it is. If you get someone who's a legitimate enthusiast into something, the rabbit hole goes down, right? And I love how they showcase this twice in this episode. Now, we've seen it with Maud before, because she's super into rocks. But as I've pointed out before, I think they did a better job of showcasing Maud in this episode than previous ones, because it's clear that she's really into rocks, and it's portrayed in a properly nuanced function rather than just being a one-off joke. And it's totally obvious that Starlight is similarly just as into kites, and it's not just a one-off joke. Love that. That's why I like to know a little bit about everything, S.A. Ross. I agree with that, Trathan. That's just being obnoxious, honestly, at that point, and that's part of reading the room, is what that is. You see, if I were to, you know, it's that stereotype, right? Let me talk extensively about insert topic here that nobody cares about, right? That's what that is. But you'll notice that Starlight is totally cool with Maud geeking out about rocks, and Maud is totally cool with Starlight geeking out about kites, and both kind of see some of the appeal of both. So, this is awesome. This is all very, very well done stuff. This then leads to Pinky coming over and screwing with everything. Although at least Derpy got a free pizza out of the matter, so that's something. And this is probably the specific scene where Pinky actually starts to annoy me. And I wanted to mention that because up until now, keep in mind of where we're at in the episode, the previous scene was her having her final freak out about trying to pretend, you know, the birds are a rock, and the tortoise is a rock, and Lyra is a rock. That was the previous scene. And up until that point, it's actually been okay to me. Because again, it's clear that she's just freaking out. We skip a little bit forward to this scene, and now she's getting irritating. Because now she's at the point where she is effectively not only just not reading the room, but trying to force something onto two ponies who both clearly and demonstrably do not want to have anything to do with it, because she's freaking out even harder. And it's a little bit much. If I was writing this episode, I would probably just tone down Pinky a little bit from this point onwards. I get that she's flipping out. I do. I get that that's the point. She doesn't need to irritate us, too. As I've said many times, deliberately irritating is still irritating. To continue to make my point, Starlight and Maud, who are just nonplussed by this whole thing, look at each other. Just a glance. Now, there's like 4 frames of animation there, which doesn't sound like a lot, but considering it's less than a second, it's actually rather nuanced. Again, lovely animation. And within that glance, the two just are like, yeah, okay. And then leave in unison. Once again, very clearly showing just how well that these two gel. So, they wander off. She learns about rocks and how awesome they are. They get each other immediately. Everything's cool. And they find a Genesis cave. The cave scene, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of skipping over this because I've actually already said everything I have to say about this. But the scene in the cave and the scene in the Genesis cave are awesome. Let me come back to that, Imperial Starter Shock. I want to finish my thought before I lose it. Because the way that the two of them... Maud opens up about why she's into rocks in a way that once again shows how much she is willing to be open with Starlight about something she's embarrassed about. Rocks don't judge you for being different. I didn't write down the exact quote, forgive me, but that's effectively what she says. I mean, there's other reasons to like rocks too. I mean, rock geekdom is a real thing in real life. In fact, rock geekdom is such a big thing in real life, it has its own sub-geek divisions. But the way that she opens up about not being judged and all that, ooh, that's... yeah, that's relatable. Yeah, sorry, they're minerals, Walter, sorry. Geologist. No, again, geologist is like, is up here. I'm talking, you can go down from there. You can go down that rabbit hole. And then they find the Genesis cave, which is awesome. And Maud is like, oh, wow, this is great. And the two of them are having this great time, and then Pinky shows up. I'll give you this episode. Pinky made me laugh there with, oh, no, I'm falling down. That got a chuckle. I'll give you that one. Also loved how Maud... Starlight's like, we're not trapped. We can get out of here with magic, because, of course, Starlight would revert to magic. And Maud's like, nah, I got this. Bonk! And we're gone. Just like that. And of course, Starlight has one last moment of gelling with Maud. Oops. Now, Imperial Star Destroyer asked, would it be better if Pinky had been moping around and unaware of Maud and Starlight spending time together? The problem is we would have to reconstruct the scene with the gorge in order to do that, but I think I would be okay with that. Because how I would reconstruct this, hear me out for a second. Oh yeah, Starlight praising Boulder, that was legit too. How I would do it is I would have Pinky, you know, the freak out up to the scene where Starlight and Maud meet, right? All of that I wouldn't actually change much, because that's pretty legit, and it's pretty on point in character and blah, blah, blah. Then she deflates, and I would actually have her leave at that point. Have Pinky just leave in disconsolate. And as Maud, by herself, is going to leave, Starlight bumps into her. Then most of the upcoming scenes play pretty much as is, minus Pinkie Pie. Every now and again, when Pinky would have entered the scene, we just kind of cut away to Pinkie Pie, who is moping, as Imperial Star Destroyer says. Now you're probably thinking, well, how do we get Maud out there? Well, that's easy. All we have to do is have Maud come to the conclusion of what she needs to do and how she wants to be by herself after a moment of indecision. Maud decides to leave, and so she ends up going out to the gorge. We cut to Pinky, who is really upset about this. Pinky, hear me out, then goes to Starlight to tell her about it. Starlight's hurt and upset, as usual, wonderful voice actress. And so Starlight, being hurt and upset, makes Pinky realize, oh, And this is the moment when Pinky understands and acknowledges the friendship that has already blossomed between Maud and Starlight. Pinky then takes Starlight to the gorge, so that Maud can acknowledge and admit to herself that she has actually found a good friend in Starlight, and therefore actually does want to come back, and that that's okay. Then she does, the end. That's how I would probably restructure it to follow that idea, and I think that would probably work better. That's just me. There'd probably have to be some specific scene restructuring to make that fit, which I'm not doing right now because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I think you could see how that might work a little bit better. And yes, it does with Darth Madoro. That's a good question, S.A. Ross. I like the idea that Trixie and Maud would totally do shows together. All right, Maud, stay here while I saw this in half. And Maud's just sitting there. And then Maud tells a random rock-related joke. Anyways. So getting back to the Genesis Cave and they escape. This is when Maud finally actually starts to lose it. First of all, and I know this sounds like I'm overstating, but Maud says... that is the first time Maud has ever expressed active irritation with her sister. I'm pretty sure ever. Like in the whole show to date. She might have done it off camera. Obviously, I can't talk to that. But on camera, that's the first time Maud has actually lost patience with Pinkie Pie. And again, Maud is understated. That's how she is. So the fact that she has reached a point of doing that means that's effectively the equivalent of someone else going, "Ugh!" Then we contrast this in the exact same scene with her very small, slight smile at Starlight after the oops scene. This then leads to Maud. I actually already referenced this earlier. Maud has the tiny lines under her eyes, and she's expressing general discontent. Her expression is slightly different. Like, there's a lot of really small things that they do as she's trying to explain to Pinky that Pinky is way overdoing it, and Pinky just keeps talking over her. Again, wonderful animation. Then Maud leaves. Pinkie Pie flips out. Of course she does. She has to, doesn't that make sense, as a rest? It makes sense that Maud would naturally have curly hair. I mean, look at her family. So Maud leaves. This then leads to Pinkie Pie going to Starlight. Once again, we have an excellent scene where a lot of characterization gets across in a very short period of time. First of all, Starlight can't help but be honest. I'm sorry, jalapeno red velvet omelets sound gross. I just can't. Also, yeah, that sounds so gross. But Starlight is quietly sad about Maud leaving. This is the scene I referenced earlier. That's... like, you could tell that this is something that hits her, because she thought she finally found someone who she was actually a friend with. Now, I re-emphasize this fact because it is very important, I think, to make this clear. She is not friends with any of the others, with the possible exception of Twilight. And maybe Spike. So, she was actually getting a legitimate real friend, which would bring her total up to maybe 3. So she's sad about losing that friendship, and she obviously wanted that friendship, and you get the point here, right? Then... oh yeah, I'm sorry, I actually forgot about Trixie. I forgot about Trixie, I'm sorry. The reason I brought that up, and the reason I wasn't mentioning Trixie is, of course, she's friends with Trixie. My point is that she's not friends with the main 6, no matter what the show likes to push. That was my point. The show likes to be like, oh, she's totally friends with the main 6. No, she isn't. She is maybe friends with Twilight, and maybe friends with Spike, and that's why I didn't mention Trixie, because of course she's friends with Trixie. So anyways, we'll talk about Sunburst later. I deliberately excluded him, because he's going to come up later. So, she's sad. And then there's this bit where she has a line, and I love this dialogue. I like Maud. She's weird. Pinky's response to that. Hey! That says so much, doesn't it? Right there. Those 2 lines. Yeah. I don't even have anything to add to that. Those 2 lines speak volumes. And, That's very, very applicable in real life as well. So then Starlight, then what happens is an even better sequence of events, where Starlight doesn't know how to tell Pinky the truth. She doesn't really want to lie to her, but she doesn't want to hurt her. There's no ill intent. This is not her being rude. Now that's important, because oftentimes when you're writing a character to be honest, most writers write them to be rude, like Applejack will be in a later episode this season. Instead, Starlight clearly is not being rude here. She does actually not want to hurt her. She doesn't want to do this, but she does tell the truth because she's Starlight. She is a very honest and open person. So, and so Starlight just kind of keeps getting weirded out and more as she's clearly screwing this up. And Pinky flees in tears, and then Starlight's like, yay, friendship lesson learned. And then just blanket over the head. That is brilliant. And it would have been so easy to screw that up in terms of presentation, voice acting, and the specific writing involved. And that, of course, also leads to, as someone pointed this out in chat, that was what Pinky needed to learn, because the others wouldn't have been this honest with her, even Applejack. Pinky needed the snap. She needed to get out of it, to get out of the loop. So, Pinky rushes off to the gorge. We're up to 5 continuity counters, by the way. Still has the wind and the eels. I mentioned nuance and subtlety with regards to the expressions of Maud in this episode. This is by far the most nuanced and subtle animation in the entire episode with regards to Maud. Maud is talking, and as she's talking, she says the line, I wrote it down, "I'm having a great time on my own." And as she's talking, her eyes shift just a bit to the left, and her eyebrows, or not her eyebrows, her eyelids move like maybe a millimeter or 2. And that's it. But that's all it needs to be because, again, Maud, right? I'm having a great time on my own. No, she isn't. She is obviously pretty hurt and upset about being out there and is trying to talk herself into it because, I mean, would you want to deal with Pinkie Pie like that for 17 days? Because I wouldn't. God, I love this so much. So then, real quick, before we get back to nuance and awesomeness, I love the big dramatic scene of her dangling over the cliff and the wind's billowing. No, you don't understand. I can't do this. It's okay. I'll just be... She's like 5 feet off the ground. It's an old joke, but I still like it. And yeah, Lumberjack Boulder with the hat and the axe, that's great. But let's get back to the episode being even more awesome. They directly contrast Pinkie Pie and Maud within seconds. And the whole episode has been hammering this point in. Every single episode that's had Maud and Pinkie Pie has been hammering this point in. But this scene is probably the textbook example of the difference and distinction between Maud and Pinkie Pie. Pinkie Pie bursts out sobbing, right? Just tears pouring from her eyes, wailing loudly, reaches out and falls dramatically on Maud while sobbing and telling her how she loves her more than all of Equestria, sob, sob, sob. Maud, gently and lightly, pats her shoulder and says, and I love you more than, I forget the thing, but it's something rock related. And that's it. Both of them mean the same thing. Both of them feel the same way. They are expressing it completely differently, and I love it. And again, that's probably the most stark one-to-one contrast we've ever seen of that variance, right? Love it. I've already, I just realized I've been talking for almost twice the length of the episode now. Hi, I'm the Lowrunner. This is kind of what I do for a living. So, Starlight's out kite flying by herself because of course she is. She just screwed up with Pinkie Pie and she's doing something to cheer herself up. Maud just kind of walks right up. We don't have to talk about our feelings, do we? No way. I want to make a point here. Something that fiction in general tends to get wrong is how to portray people really gelling with each other. Usually what fiction does is they notice when two actors happen to have really good chemistry, and they just kind of latch onto that. A lot of really good scenes of great chemistry over the years in movies and television both, this also applies to video games, is when they have allowed two actors who really get each other to just riff. A lot of the MCU stuff, a lot of more recent, God, I'm trying to think of examples here. There are several scenes in Star Trek, several of the Disney films. I'm thinking of stuff I've analyzed recently. Several Pixar bits, most notably Tom Hanks and I can't remember the other guy's name. The guy who plays Woody and Buzz Aldrin, or Buzz Lightyear, excuse me. Not Buzz Aldrin. Based on Buzz Aldrin. Oh my god, I can't think of his name. Tim Allen, thank you. Tim Allen and Tom Hanks. A lot of those great scenes of great chemistry have happened because the writers don't know how to write it, but what they did is they shoved the people in a scene, and they just let them go, and they took notes, or they literally just kept the takes as the two actors were acting off of each other, right? I bring this up because it's exceptionally rare that a fictional writer knows how to write a fictional chemistry properly, right? This might be an example of that. Because, and I know this is so stupid to really emphasize this point. Starlight's here, Maud walks up, and they just fly kites. That's chemistry. There doesn't need to be this big dramatic scene. There doesn't need to be that, hey, it's you, brofist. They're just there, and they're happy to be there. That's it. Brilliantly constructed. It's comfort. A lot of chemistry comes down to how comfortable two characters are with each other. Yeah, no preachy Aesop, too. Also, Maud! Starlight! Yeah, no, that's not chemistry. Although, you say that jokingly, of course, but that is a good point. In Predator, they wanted to show, I forget all the characters' names, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's character and the other guy's character, they wanted to show that they had a long-standing friendship and chemistry together, and that's how they did it. And that's not how that works. That is actually badly written, for being 100% honest with each other, which makes my point for me. Carl Weathers, thank you. But yeah. Oh, and of course, slippers. She's got the slippers. Ah, okay, we're good. I'm leaving. Other way, sorry. This is a fantastic episode. I can't give it purple. Pinky's deliberate, but nevertheless absolutely irritating frustration in the latter half of the episode drags it down. I'm sorry. But I do think this episode deserves red. This is the worst episode I've ever seen, Mr. Red. If it's not obvious for the last 48 minutes of me discussing this episode, I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think there's a lot of good. But again, the deliberate and absolute aggravating irritation drags it down to red, in my opinion. I'm sorry. But this is definitely a red episode, which makes for our second red episode by Mr. Confalone. So that's awesome. And there's some great stuff here. I love it. More of this, please. Now, let us look up next week. I'll go ahead and chop off the local recording.